We have some clients who choose to work with some industry consultants who are helping in a broader transformational sense, and that's awesome. But they don't need to work with a Salesforce development shop. It's a really important distinction because if you go and engage that consultant, that Salesforce development shop day one, and you don't speak Salesforce and they don't speak RIA, then you're not going to get the thing that you're hoping will work for you when you turn it on.
Hey, Connected Advisor community, welcome back to another episode. This week, we have my co-founder, Judd Mackrill, pinch hitting for me, and he is serving as the host of the Connected Advisor this week for a very wonderful and insightful conversation with Adrian Johnstone, the CEO of Practifi. For those of you that don't know, Practifi is a CRM focused on serving RIAs built on the Salesforce chassis. Adrian shares the specific challenges that RIAs face with generic CRMs and what forward-thinking firms are considering around data. Please enjoy this week's episode of The Connected Advisor.
All right. So Adrian, today, where are you located in the world?
I am currently sitting, I'd love to say in sunny Chicago, but actually the weather's terrible.
Nice. Yeah. It's December in Chicago when we're recording this. So it's... although these are supposed to be evergreen and timeless, the reality is that we are traveling all over to run our businesses. So, Adrian, Chicago's definitely part of your life, but from what I know, it looks like you live elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I do. I split my time between Sydney in Australia and here in Chicago. It's fair to say that you throw in the conference circuit in both countries and the amount of travel time, and plenty of people would say I live in a Qantas jet, but it's pretty much half and half between Sydney and Chicago.
Excellent. So let's talk about how you got to this bicontinental lifestyle that you have. How did you come about starting Practifi and land in the wealth management space?
Yeah, so there's probably two converging stories there. How did I land in the wealth management space? Probably the first part. And I guess like a lot of people coming out of school, bounced around, did all sorts of different things, took a big stint out and went in my late kind of 20s, early 30s, went and did the I'm going to discover myself journey through Southeast Asia and came back and said, I want to get out of the space I'm in and I want to get into the financial services market. And that happened to land me in retirement in Australia. And that was the beginning of the journey into the wealth management space. And from there, I kind of folded forward in some consulting roles and eventually opened my own consulting company, which was great down in Australia and New Zealand. And we ran through kind of sat at the intersections of compliance and regulation, which if you've heard anything about the Australian wealth management space, is a disaster, and the emergence of technology as a solution to that, overlaid with kind of client experience. And that kind of drove me deeper and deeper into it. And in doing that, I famously sat there once and said, the only thing I'd never want to do in this space is sell software. And that was about 6 months before becoming a co-founder in Practifi. So turns out I should never say never. And Practifi really came about kind of as a journey of my co-founder ran a Salesforce implementation shop. And like every Salesforce implementation, it was expensive and bespoke and all those kind of things. And he and I were just sitting around over some wine and saying there's got to be a better way of solving that problem. And that was to productize it. And so it was, how do we take this really powerful platform and turn it into something actually usable for firms? And that was the origin story of Practifi, and here we are today.
That's excellent. Give me a little bit of detail on the team that you have today and the customer base and all of that. It definitely feels like your company really had a pretty strong trajectory once you entered the US market. I kept seeing you with a lot more like meaningful wealth management firms. But what's the business look like today?
So we are around 70-ish people. We've got rapidly approaching about 10,000 users. So a pretty good footprint. We work exclusively with RIAs or their equivalent. So we have clients on multiple continents in 5 countries, and they all are independent advisory businesses. They're called different things because they're in different markets, but that's where they are. The bulk of our business is here in North America, and we're really, we're an awesome kind of fit to RIAs of any scale, but It's firms who are approaching $1 billion through to kind of 50 billion. So they've got the complexity that's started to fold in to their business. They typically either have or are considering some type of structured operations management or business leadership structure. And they've got client complexity that's coming in. So they find the more simplistic wealth CRMs and workflow tools can't meet their needs. And they've looked at the big platforms like Salesforce and Microsoft and thought, well, I haven't got millions to spend making that work forever. So how do I find a product solution in the middle that fits? And that's really where we play.
Yeah, excellent. So from my understanding, Practifi, you are effectively an overlay on Salesforce. Is that true or false?
We could get into a heated conversation here, Jeff. I think overlay is my least favorite word in the English language these days.
That's fair. That's fair.
It is a false statement to say that Practifi is an overlay of Salesforce. It is a true statement to say that Practifi is built on a Salesforce chassis.
Okay.
And the distinction there is that Salesforce has a number of direct products that they put in market, Financial Services Cloud being the one that people hear the most about in our space. We're not dependent on any of their products. We use them as a platform, as a service, like someone might use Amazon or something else. But Practifi is an RIA-specific solution built on that chassis.
Okay. So that gives you a lot more flexibility than I think some of the other solutions that people are choosing. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, I think we think it gives us the best of both worlds because we get the development pathway of Salesforce, and it's an excellent platform. It really is. And they continue to lean into it and evolve it and do that. We have access to that toolkit. We use the same developer tools that you would use if you went and built custom Salesforce yourself. We're not bounded by that, but we're also not tied to their product roadmap. So if Financial Services Cloud isn't building something that's RIA specific because they're focused at that point in time on a retail bank or something like that, we're not stuck with that encumbrance. So it means that we can consume the best that's available, but we can also build specifically for our clients. And that really, you sort of feel that when you get into things like workflow engines. And, we have theirs, but we also built our own because it's more fit for purpose, or integrations get deeper than the standard Salesforce integrations because they're hitting a pretty simple data model.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so if you look at your business today, there's obviously the software where you have the infrastructure layer of Salesforce, but really the experience layer is Practifi. The thing I've always thought is pretty interesting is sometimes you have these point solutions that advisors are using, and I think they're accumulating more of those all the time, from estate planning to all these different things. And I don't think that's going anywhere, because I think individually, I find myself adopting more point solutions just through my day-to-day operations. But you go through that process, I think there's this kind of expectation that you're going to be able to just turn your software on and it's going to work out the box the way you'd expect. But that the reality is, and I was executive at Orion, and I know a lot of that world there. There's a human capital element to making it all successful. And I think that's probably one of the biggest gripes that people have with Salesforce is they're agnostic to whatever sector you're in. However you want to use it, there's all kinds of different avenues you can take, but you ultimately want it to work for you now. So how does this service and software break down across your team, and how you help people have success?
Sometimes it's easier for me if you think of it as an analogy. And if you get up in the morning and you decide you want coffee, you don't want to decide that you need to grow beans and ship them and grind them and roast them and get milk and do all that. You just want coffee. I think people forget when they look at these big platform providers that they still have to design and build and configure and maintain and test and all those sorts of things, all the custom work that goes into that for them. And so for us, we as a product aim to be totally fit for purpose. So you can turn Practifi on and you can go. Now, we both know it's never as simple as you flick a switch and you can just go. Yes, there is a version of Practifi you can turn on without any data in it and key it in from day one, just as you can with other solutions, and it'll work perfectly for you. But your business isn't being turned on day one. It has client records and poor data quality and you've got workflows and you sort of want to keep them the same, but you want to adjust them. And that's where the services piece comes in. And so if you are working with Practifi today, you come to us and it's our team who will help you. So we have an implementation team, a client success function, and they'll run you through that journey. And for some firms, that can be super quick, might be a week or two. Here's some data, get it in, teach us how to use it. We have a very comprehensive learning management system, get us up to speed, and then we're happy to just get going and we'll learn more about it over time. For others, they've got 20 years of history, they've got teams spread out geographically with a broad sense of tech capability and all those sorts of things. And they want us to run a project with them that might take a year or more, depending on their change appetite. So we're still the team there to do that. We have some clients who choose to work with some industry consultants who are helping in a broader transformational sense, and that's awesome. But they don't need to work with a Salesforce development shop. And it's a really important distinction, because if you go and engage that consultant, that Salesforce development shop day one, and you don't speak Salesforce and they don't speak RIA, then you're not going to get the thing that you're hoping will work for you when you turn it on.
It's really interesting, just kind of through the different firms that I've been able to serve or consult or be part of over the years. There's a lot of subsidies happening before the custodial aggregation of Schwab and TD. And, TD Ameritrade would often offer soft dollars to people to use Salesforce or, these other softwares. And once that happened, once Schwab drove the TD price down so low, they had to buy it. And they took out this really formidable competitor. Those soft dollars went away, and a lot of people were left realizing a few months later, like, oh, this is what I now owe on Salesforce. I never saw the full rack rate before. Oh, okay. Now I have to figure this out. Oh, also, my version is isolated over here. I really do want to have the benefits of all this different stuff. And it led a lot of people I know to scramble and talk to all these different consultancies and spend a lot of time and focus. And it was a real spiral and a distraction for a lot of people.
I think people forget that that's to make the decision on day one.
Yeah.
But then they've got to keep making that decision. And the more custom they go, the more decisions they've got to make. And there's always that point of question of like, what business do you want to be in?
Right. That's exactly it. I was talking to Eric Clark one time, and I was running a company that now I've since sold. But at the time I was looking at, should I buy my building to like just be in? Because I hate dealing with, working with my landlord and what they want to charge you for build outs. And I'm like, forget this, I'll just buy it. And he's like, well, what business do you want to be in? I'm like, well, I don't want to be in real estate. I don't want to be in CRM. I want to be in running an RIA and focus on that. And so like being able to kind of come to that realization and realize, okay, there are people like Practifi that exist out there to take that burden off of me and my team, so we actually can just focus on running our client relationships.
I've been having this conversation repeatedly. I think for a lot of people, CRM, because of some of those things you talked about, it's been shunted around. It was propped up through subsidies, or you got the genericized version that the Home Office told you could use or whatever. The people have started to go, well, it's just too hard. I'm just going to pick one of the simple options because that's all I need. And the conversation keeps coming back to, so what business do you want to be 3 years from now? Because you don't want to keep making this change. So pause and think, where are you going? What's the focus in your business? And how are you going to put relationships at the middle of that? It's all too often that we see firms, and we're a competitor to a number of parties in the market. It's no secret. You see so many prospective firms will say, oh, I went with this one because it was cheaper and it just felt easier, or it seemed really intuitive for two of my advisors. And it's like, well, that's great, but what does the business you look like? You want to add a trust division, you're buying an accounting firm. How are they going to handle? Oh, they won't be able to use it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, hang on. So how are you going to do that? Now you're going to have 2 CRMs, 3 CRMs, and you see the kind of pennies drop of, maybe I made a very short-term decision here and I'm going to have to remake it 12, 24, 36 months from now.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Hey, this is Judd Mackrill. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. The things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all of that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well, and we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is judd@milemarker.co, and I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
One of the things I found that's quite interesting about Practifi when I first saw you in the market, and I think it was maybe some of the work you guys were doing with various focus firms at the time, really kind of brought you, I thought, a lot more visibility, at least in the places I was. I felt like you guys invested a lot in design at the front end. Salesforce in and of itself, it's kind of generic by design, right? And a lot of the other players out there that you compete with had almost made it worse. The generic was a little worse. Like it was like, guys, this is not great to begin with, but now you've added a lot more form fields and it's even more difficult for people to like navigate and learn. And I don't know if it's really elevating people's experience, but talk about that a little bit in terms of when you decided to go to market, how that influenced how you went to market.
Yeah, so it influences so much about everything that we do. Salesforce is one very flat plane, and it gets filled up with fields. And whether you're an advisor or an operations person or a compliance manager, the world you see when you log in is just one very flat record, and you pick your pieces out of it as best you can. And we found that really drove adoption down. People, when they look at systems, CRM is already something that if you're an advisor, you feel like you have to use, not something you feel like you want to use. Like it's giving you something. It's just taking up time. And so we put a lot of work into design to try and make the system as intelligent as possible. I was going to say intuitive, but that's such a hard to pin down word. And so it's, how do we get the system to answer the questions that you most likely need to ask, depending on your role? Yeah. So it knows when you log in and you're an advisor, you care more about who you need to call, what you need to talk to them about, and what work you've got going on for those clients. Whereas if you're in a trading team, you care about a list of trades that need doing. You don't want things presented by client callback. You want them presented by trades in priority order or whatever. And so we really went very hard at this role-based concept, which is very, very different to the standard Salesforce platform. And not always different to every other piece of software, but very different to that. And then we went down a design path of saying, how do you bring clear space? So it's interesting. Some users want you to look as much like Facebook as possible, and others think that that's a terrible direction and you should never go there. What you should look like is a very dense Excel page. There's always going to be a spectrum of people who like or dislike what you're doing. But I think for us, it's trying to strike that balance between an information-rich record page that's easily consumable, depending on what your needs are and the role that you're in. And that continues to permeate what we're doing today. In fact, we're looking at some work today with groups of clients on how we test that, how we push those boundaries and rethink. We pretty regularly rethink that design principle and just retest it as a theory. Yeah. How do we not make wholesale change because that's disruptive, but how do we keep it fresh?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the thing that it really does separate, and from this point forward, being empathetic inside of how all these systems work. I think a lot of times you get these larger companies that are just not able to reach down to those conversations. They're kind of caught up in their conglomeration, and being able to kind of just take a second and say, all right, this is the user. These are the problems they need to solve every day. How can we make it faster and easier for them to solve those problems so they can go on to what they really ideally want to be doing with their time? All that's obviously continuing to change, and I think it's going to change at a more rapid pace with the advancement of technology. So Adrian's going to ask you, you put the 3-year number up there in terms of what your RIAs should be looking to and aspiring to. Where do you see technologies like Practifi going in 3 years? Because the pace of changes is accelerating.
3 years on the technology side feels like a lifetime for sure. Yeah. But I think there's some very clear directions. It's impossible to have a conversation these days without talking about AI. And whilst in the past, I've been pretty clear to say, I think it's an interesting technology that's still yet to find the really stellar use case. And I think that remains a little true today, but the speed at which it's getting there it's very, very clear. So I think for me, the industry has looked at efficiency gains from an AI perspective. It's looked at content creation and the note-taking and all those kind of Gen AI pieces. There's obviously been machine learning type tools around for a while. But for me, I think that the industry is necessarily headed towards a richer relationship, whether that is because of the generational change in clients and in advisors. I don't think we talk about that anywhere near enough. And so technology has to, particularly CRM technology, it has to move forward into the process. It has to move more into the client engagement, client acquisition space, not and therefore less in the efficiency and workflow space, but I think it needs to stretch further forward. I've done a few sessions recently, including at Schwab, talking about growth and particularly organic growth. I think everyone is now starting to talk about how low the growth percentages are across RIAs. And activity over the next 3 years, I think, is going to be very centered in that growth conversation. How do we realize that you can't always just acquire your way to growth, and you can't just rely on the markets to deliver it? Although at the moment, that's great, and we don't want to upset it. But you also need to be able to build solid, sustainable growth organically as well.
Yeah. I think you need time back to be creative in your business. And, I think that's where empathetic software comes in helping you get that lift. This is excellent. So Adrian, really quick, who are you most appropriate for in the wealth management market? Are you all the way up to banks and trusts, and then all the way working with like independent 1 or 2 person shops? What does that spectrum look like?
We shouldn't put it by person size, but there's a natural piece there is when your firm has started to have separate teams and some logic to the management structure, so that it's not just, some advisors trying to be everything to everybody all of the time. So often that coalesces around the 10 to 15 person or the 500, 750 mil range. And then because of our chassis, we're appropriate all the way through to wirehouses and trusts and what have you. But our focus is really, it's the layer below there. It's the very large RIA. We do a lot of work with aggregators, firms that are growing a lot through M&A, because we bring that repeatable structure, but with platform at scale that they can really rely on. So often for those firms, they love the idea of enterprise software and what Salesforce as a chassis can bring them. But equally, they don't want to build a team of 20 people and throw tens of millions of dollars at it. So we can alleviate the need for that.
Very cool. And how do you guys think about, advisors owning their data and controlling their data? How does that work inside of the Practifi world today? If I have my own data lake, how does that work and play well with Practifi?
Yeah, so all those technologies are plug and play. With Practifi, every client has their own instance of Practifi, and the data's there. We don't store it centrally, we don't use it centrally. It's proprietarily their information. If they want to pull that out into a data lake technology and overlay business intelligence and those sorts of things, that's great. You can push a lot of that information very easily back into Practifi to inform the relationship as well. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Very cool. Well, thank you for spending some time with me. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to watch you grow this business and work and spend the time. I know, working on a couple different continents and serving 5 different continents of clients and all these different systems is in no small feat. So congratulations on the success that you've had with Practifi.
Yeah, thank you. And likewise for you at Milemarker. It's been great to jump on and chat.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adrian. And thanks everybody for listening.
Well, that certainly was an information-packed episode. Adrian, thanks again for joining the show and sharing your wisdom. with our audience. And thank you to my co-founder, Judd Mackrill, for pinch hitting and being a host on this episode of The Connected Advisor. That has been another episode. So please make sure you click follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this or watching it. And if you would be so kind, please leave a review so that more people can find great conversations like this one with Adrian Johnstone. But until the next episode, enjoy every mile.